Hey everybody, it's Percy King, another episode of King Speak. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share this. Now, today, basically what I'm going to talk about is what happened in Kerr County, Texas. Everybody by now knows about the flash flood that they had that killed well over 100 people, including a slew of children. Very, very sad. However, most of you now know that they had the opportunity because they were given money twice by former President Biden and under Obama administration to, help with their warning system because it's known as Flood Alley, and they decided that they didn't want the money. However, they kept the money and decided to spend it in other places. Otherwise, things might have been different. So the money was earmarked for something specific to help them with their flood issue, at least as far as warning system, and they decided to not use it for that. The interviews that some of their politicians gave did not age well because you hear them saying, no, we don't want the earmarks, we don't want to have to do what Biden wants us to do, they're communists and they hate America and all this different stuff, and they were just trying to address their problem for them. It wasn't as if they were saying that we're only giving this to you if you change who you are. It was nothing like that. I don't really understand what the issue was. I get the philosophy. I understand that the philosophy of some, conservatives, many conservatives, is that, we would like to pay for our own stuff. We would like to determine what happens with our money, so therefore we don't want the government to be able to do this, that, and the other. So we don't want them, shall we say, earmarking money or using our money in a specific way so that we can determine what happens with our money. We would rather save that tax money and be personally responsible. There was one lady on there talking about, if we take this money, I'm going to hold you personally responsible. That really didn't age very well at all. But there's some things about Kerr County I want you to know. I do have a relative that lives a county over, and this relative actually has a newer, really nice house, rather large house. However, what my relative told me was that, he had been over to Kerr County and compared to the folks who live in Kerr County, that he was poor because he said a lot of people over there have an awful lot of money. So what you have is an area where people have an awful lot of money, not all of them, but their per person average wages is much higher than most places, and they do have an awful lot of people who are very well to do. So not all, but I'm sure that some of the kids who went to their camp, especially when you see the history of the kids that went to that camp, that a lot of them may have been children of well-to-do parents. Now that's just to say that they were given the money for the warning system, and even if they didn't want to use it and they used it for something else, why is it that they didn't put together their own warning system? People want to know that, and it is a legitimate question. Another thing is that why weren't there any buildings on stilts that could have taken, the flooding and been a place where, the children and or others could go? Now, I get it. They're not going to have buildings like that everywhere. However, knowing the nature of this area, I wanted to give some suggestions and not just, tear the people down and say, well, why didn't you do this? Or you guys just shouldn't have given that money to other things. Use deep piles. You could anchor them in bedrock, and you can have a stilted building with, I looked it up, with breakaway lower floors, so that if flooding came, the lower floors could break away and you can still be in the upper areas. Now, there could have been several of these structures in different places such that people would have had, time to get to them if they were close enough. And even if they weren't, they may have been able to, float to them and then pull themselves up and end up out of, harm's way. Another thing is that in making a warning system, there are companies that design these things for a living. Of course, there could be sensors all throughout the area that would determine when the water rose, and it could be real time sending out warnings, not just with a siren, but we have, Amber Alerts, get these silver alerts all the time in Florida when, some old person is lost or some, kid has been taken. why can't they have a system that does that when the water gets up to a certain level, and then it could actually give you real-time information. These sensors have said that there's water here. These sensors have said that there's water here. So therefore making it easier for people to know where the water is at all times. And it could appear through, their television system. It can appear through their cell phones, whatever is necessary. You have an area where you have the ability to pay for something like this. Like I said, I get the philosophy. But there are certain things that your philosophy needs to actually yield to. And not necessarily yield, but it needs to become sensible to keep you and your children safe. This isn't one of those things where people are saying, well, no, we don't need to do it. You've seen what happens. You've seen the storms come. It keeps happening. Now, it may not happen like this before, but it shouldn't take something like this for you to understand that there is a time where you should pay tax dollars to put things in place, because these type of structures could be on vacant land all over the place so that people can get to them along that floodplain. You also could pass laws that make it so that if someone decided to, allow them to put a structure on their land, that they wouldn't have any liability just in case somebody got injured or something on their structure. It could be a way of making sure that there were several places for people to go to and be able to be safe. Like I said, there's many things that could happen. And instead of just saying, okay, you guys did nothing and it's your fault. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's going to be difficult for people to understand why they should feel bad. Yeah, of course they're going to mourn the loss of life as far as the kids are concerned. But some of the adults, I can tell you that a lot of people don't really care about them. That is, if they were amongst the people who were for using the money for other things and not, a warning system. And they had the ability to pay for these things, because there's no mistaking that they had the ability to pay for these things. They did. They did choose not to. It's not their kids' fault that they had parents that people believe were objectively stupid, were objectively careless. I looked at some of the posts that people had and a lot of the comments, people saying that they were members of their cult, and that's the reason why you don't become a member of the cult. I don't even need to go into anything like that. But what I can say is that if any parent who was against the warning system and any parent that lost a child, if they don't feel like they played any role in this happening, there's something wrong with them. They don't have to want to end it all or anything like that because of it. But if they don't feel terrible, if they don't feel anything, if they were part of this, and even if they didn't lose anybody, but they know people who did because of the way that they were about something, there's something wrong with you. There's something really wrong with you. At some point in time, instead of not wanting to be perceived in a certain way, you have to recognize that you're going to be actually a bad person if you don't take some accountability for something and realize that you were wrong about this. You were wrong. And no amount of saying that, oh, this is 100-year storm, this, that, and the other, that won't change it. You have storms like, that cause the water to come up, and the area floods. Just accept your part in this and change it so that you're no longer a part of the problem. Because ultimately, the kids and the kids in the area and the other residents in the area who don't feel like you are counting on you to be different this time. They're counting on you to be sensible and realize that you need this system. Even if it's only every 25 years that you even get a warning, it is still worth it. None of these people should have lost their life. I don't care if they even didn't want the system. I would rather none of those people be dead. And I hope that everybody else feels the same. So let's discuss this in the comments. Like this, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Again, Percy King Speak.